101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. One of his advocacy, forging real men, one value at a time. No other than Mr. Travis Murray.
Hello, glad to be here.
Welcome on Book 101, Mr. Travis. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I started a podcast on values and forging men. And the reason for that is I noticed that a lot of men don't have uh, secure values in the way that they live their lives. They're more like water flowing into containers, shapeable with the environment around them versus sturdy and solid like they should be. So, I'm a values coach. I'm living my life to teach others to be better in their own lives.
Mr. Travis Murray, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about the powerful and transformative process of turning shame into strength. The forge implies a transformative, often brutal process. Why is shame such a potent and perhaps necessary fuel for this kind of profound personal transformation?
Yeah, so shame leads a lot of what we do. A lot of times when we're making choices, one of the key reasons we don't do something or that we do something is whether or not we'll be shamed for doing so. And when we are shamed, we live a life in that shame and we have a hard time getting over it. It builds traumatic responses within our own brain and neural pathways. And so building values off of the shame that we received or turning your life around after receiving that shame or building up from it is key in growth. And I've noticed that in my own life, in the lives of friends that I've helped along the way, when we talk about the shame that they underwent and how that shame really affected their lives, we can start to see key points and where they turn away from their dreams and goals and aspirations and lead a life of just stability in like the common workplace, just being unhappy and just trying to build resilience against the shame.
How do you distinguish between unproductive, debilitating shame that can be lead to change?
So most shame can lead to change. It's just depending on how the person is willing to accept the shame as part of their lives. Like, you know, we have children who, wet the bed and they're ashamed of that. They don't want their friends to know. They don't want anyone else to know. But really it's something that as simple as that process is just a reflex in the body that's not working correctly. And there's no reason nor rhyme to be ashamed of something so minuscule as something like that that can change over time as we grow up. But a lot of the shame in, say, I'm a father and I'm married now, but in divorce leads a lot of shame for men as well. They feel like are not enough. And that key driving factor for most men in believing that they're not enough is relevant in the world and that a few times over, if you will. And so getting the understanding of why one feels like they're not enough and understanding the world that they live in that built that environment up to that point can relieve the shame of not feeling like you're not enough and start to really understand that you are enough and what you know and what you do can be shared into the world.
Mr. Travis, what is the actual psychological and emotional process of alchemizing the lead and weight of shame into the gold of strength? What are the steps?
So it's one, naming it. It's and I talk about this in my podcast under the term of resistance. Resistance is a lot of things that our body tells us that we're not good enough for these processes. Um, the first step is naming it. You have to understand what the resistance is, what the shame is. You need to name it, call it forward into your own world, into your mind, because once you do so, you can see it's not that heavy of a burden, and it starts with that key step. Get it out in front of you, understand why it's there, and then you can then start to heal from it.
Start to heal and let it go for sure. On the personal experience and lowest moments, when we are in the midst of a shame spiral, what does it feel like physically, mentally, and emotionally? How can we first just recognize it for what it is?
Yeah, so I would say in a personal level, I started to recognize the shame and the resistance that I was facing when it happened to me in one of my lowest moments by seeking comfort. And what I mean by comfort could be a number of things. It could be alcoholism. It could be, you know, going out and, meeting people at bars just for a one-time excuse to be intimate. It's one of those situations where you just avoid doing the hard stuff and seek the easier comforts in your life. And when we start to do that, we start to build those neural pathways to then tell us, hey, go seek that comfort, get that food, go out and buy that alcohol, and stay home, don't go out, don't make friends, don't meet friends, don't call your friends, don't call your family, because it's easier. And so we start to do the easy thing instead of the hard things.
Definitely. And how does the narrative we construct about our shameful experience, I'm fraud, I'm lovable or unlovable, deepen the wound, and how to begin to rewrite that story?
Yeah, so a lot of us, the trust that we place in others is minuscule to the amount of trust we place in ourselves. And so when we trust ourselves more than we trust other people, especially those trying to help us, when we're the ones telling ourselves that we are the problem, that we have the issues and the vices and the addictions, and we're not enough because of all of those things, they start to build because we keep on relying on those easy comforts. And so they start to build within us, and we trust ourselves more than we trust anyone else. And so if we're the ones telling ourselves we're no good, we can't do this, we will start to believe that we cannot do that. And that's where we start to see that spiral downward, because then we start adding those addictions, we start adding those vices, and then those are just fuel for that shame spiral of not enough that we keep on placing on our own heads.
Why is shame is so amplified by silence, Mr. Travis, and secrecy? And how does bringing into the light, even just to ourselves, begin to disarm its power?
Yeah, so when it's silent and we don't talk about it, it becomes a secret. And a secret starts to burn within our own chests, within our own voices, that we want to let out. But we're so ashamed to let it out that we just reel it back in and we keep it quiet, we keep it silent. And one of the key steps in resolving that shame and healing from that shame is to call it out into the light so that you can see that, whatever your resistance is that you're facing, the that amplifies that I'm not enough feeling, or like imposter syndrome, or any of those things, we start to amplify those by not talking about it, because again, we're the only ones talking to ourselves, we're the only ones that we trust to know our secret. And so when you're in that shame spiral, you cannot be your own coach. You cannot be your own therapist. You need to go seek help. You need to get it into the light, or you will just spiral, spiral, spiral.
How do we consciously search for the lesson or catalyst for growth within shameful experience without spiraling into self pity or rumination, Mr. Travis?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to teach is writing it down. Start with a morning process, build routines, and then in those routines, you do the work. You just continue to do the work and you put action before words. So you write it down because that's part of the action, and then you do an action toward your value that is aligned with your value. And the more you can continue to build those routines and build those values, then you start to uncover the growth opportunities, and then you start to realize that you actually are enough, that you actually deserve to be where you are in a sense of like if you're having imposter syndrome or something like that. Because in those moments of growth, you start to obtain a new light when you're starting to think about those problems that you faced in the past.
Interesting, Mr. Travis. And on the process of transformation, what is the very first, most manageable action someone can take when you feel completely consumed by shame to start moving through it?
Yeah, I would say one of the first actions that you can do is grab yourself like a notepad or open up your notes app on your phone and then just write it down. Write what you're feeling down. And I know that, in when I was growing up, talking about your feelings wasn't exactly, the normal, the mainstream idea, but it does strengthen the bond that you have with yourself and with others. So when you take the step to write it down, you're uncovering what the problem is, you're recognizing it for what it is, and then you can talk about the triggers that began to form that feeling, that shame. And then from there, when you can't quite uncover all of the truth, or you can't quite heal from that process, you can then start to ask for help from like a therapist or a licensed counselor or someone like that.
How does practicing radical self-compassion act as the essential attitude to shame toxic narrative? And what does the practice look like in a moment of crisis?
Yeah, so radical compassion is a big thing. I talk about in the Forge setting that I use in my podcast, the hammer of compassion, and hitting that value with compassion in yourself and your thought process with compassion. Because the thing is, we all make mistakes. We all are in this way human, and part of that is when you ask somebody for help, or you go to a friend or you go to a family member and you let them know that you lost your job or something of that nature, their first reaction to most of that is it's going to be okay. They try to reassure you, they give you compassion in those moments. So if you trust yourself, and you should, then you need to bring yourself that compassion as well. Think about your issue as a third party. And then again, give yourself that compassion. I made a mistake. I did this, I lost my job, or I got divorced. It's okay. I'm going to rebuild from here. Because when you start to want to rebuild, you start building the neural pathways that elicit a response via books for one. Like when I was at my lowest form, I started to uncover the shame spirals, and I started to understand why I was going through these shame spirals by myself, because I did have a stigma against therapists, unfortunately. And I'm over that now, but at the time I didn't want to tell anyone else my secrets. I was too ashamed of those secrets. So I started looking for help elsewhere. So I started first and foremost on like YouTube, looking at, men trying to be men, and they're teaching their ideologies and that. And then I was like, well, let's start in books. So I started picking up books. I started reading books, and the book started to change my life because it's my own voice when I'm reading that book. It's my own voice telling me what I need to know. And again, like I said, you trust yourself more than you trust anyone. And so if you're telling yourself bad things, then you're going to start to feel the bad things come to light. And if you're telling yourself good things, you're going to start to feel those good things come to light. And so when you're reading those books and you're understanding the books in your own way, in your own words, you start to trust that you're doing the right thing. And so giving yourself that compassion to know that it's okay to make mistakes, to know that you're going to recover from those mistakes, it is important in the process of that healing journey.
Mr. Travis, as a coach, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
So, as a coach, my short-term goals are to get people to understand that, you know, it's okay to give yourself compassion when you have hit a low point in your life. It's okay to give yourself compassion in the moments that you make mistakes. And in the long-term portion of my teachings, it's that we can all grow and we can all share the kindness that one another can give to each other, because this world is just filled with so much hate and resentment. We can turn that resentment and hate into kindness and love. And if we can do that with our children first, then we can grow a population that is based on kindness and love. And that's where I want to, move into the future for. It's for, the children, but it starts in the home. It starts with the father. It starts with the mother. And as a father myself, I speak only to the father aspect of it. But in that same sense, like I said, it starts with the father, and the father's going to get there and teach their children that compassion, teach their children that they can bounce back from those moments when they make a mistake. And, I wouldn't even call them mistakes. I would call them opportunities for growth.
For sure, opportunity to growth. And Mr. Travis, good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a coach like you?
I would say that put action to words. Start doing the reading. Start doing the uncovering of truth for yourself. Understand where you want to be. Understand your own goals. Practice your coaching on yourself and live the coaching that you teach and preach. That's what I would say to do. It's the easiest thing to do because, again, like I said, you trust yourself more than others. So if you can find a process that works for you, you can then find a process that might work for others as well, and you can start teaching that.
Definitely. And thank you for that advice, Mr. Travis. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, I'll give you two. I actually have about six that I was prepared for because I love books, but there's two of them that specifically changed my life a little bit more than the others. And the first one is by an author named Simon Squibb. It's What's Your Dream? So I read this book and front to cover. I actually read it twice and then listened to it on Audible because I just enjoyed it that much. But he teaches in there that we all have a dream. We all have an aspiration to reach something greater within ourselves. And by not serving that to the public, by not serving that to the people around you, you're actually hurting the world around you. And so, in that sense, you should start to take action toward your dreams. And speaking of action, another book that I read, and I'm not sure about the language for your podcast here, but it's Unf Yourself by Gary John Bishop. And in that book, he talks about action being at the forefront of your mind. He talks about telling yourself instead of I'll try, to something of the way of I am going to. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do X. I am willing to do X. I am willing and able to do X. And just progressively getting yourself to the point where, like, if you want to read a book, I am willing and able to read that book. And then you go and do it. You set action to, the words that you're choosing to use, and you write it down. You write down what you're willing to do. You hold yourself accountable. And in some cases, have somebody else in your corner, have a friend, have a family member, and hold each other accountable. Help each other find the way and the will to meet where you are, and hold each other accountable to the actions that you want to live in this world. And the two of those books go hand in hand. Perform the actions that lead to the end result of your goal, which should be your dream. And live your dream for yourself, live your dream for your family, live your dream for your kids, live your dream for others around you.
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Travis. And let's see, can you share a brief story of a time you personally had to put yourself through the forge and what the strength on the other side looked like?
Yeah, so I lived a period where I didn't understand that I was actually in a shame cycle. It started off when I separated from my fiance at the time, and in that process, she took my kids with her, and I didn't understand the laws around, custody, and so I thought that, a mother should have the kids, so I didn't really fight her on that, and I didn't know what I was missing out on by not fighting her on that, and so, a couple years later, I'm a weekend father and a stepfather now, but in that moment of losing those kids, I thought I lost my world. That's all I wanted was to be a father, and so at that time, and so it was so hurtful and so it rocked my world, I'll just say, and it put me in a cycle where I sought comforts like alcohol, and I would go drinking almost every night, and it wasn't good. The only nights I wouldn't drink was the nights I had my kids, and I wanted the alcohol even then, and I got myself into this position where, I would have alcohol in my fridge or in my cabinets just so I had it on hand whenever I craved it, and whenever somebody gave me the opportunity to go out drinking, I'd go out drinking, and it was just a horrible, horrible experience. Every day was packed full of regret, packed full of shame, and I just kept living that cycle for years to come, and I tried to be in relationships, but they didn't work out because I didn't want to technically be in a relationship as I saw it now. I wanted to be alone. I needed to be alone if I speak the truth on the matter. And then, I decided to be alone later in my life, and in that moment, I started to want more, not alcohol. I actually thought about the alcohol as a crutch, and I didn't want my crutch anymore. And so I put the alcohol away, I dumped it down the sink, and I decided from that moment on, and the reason I did so is seeing your kids grow up can be a big factor. It's not for everybody, but for some people, when their kids start to notice things and bring them up to you, you tend to want to make changes. And so one of my kids actually said to me, how come you always have so much beer in the fridge? And I didn't know how to answer that question, but it hit me deep in my heart, and I was like, I need to make a change. And so sometimes the universe will ask you a question, and that question will resonate deep inside of your very soul, right? And so in that moment, you can take it and learn from it and grow from it, or you can seep back into the shame spiral and never really recover from it. And to this day, I don't have an alcohol problem anymore, and I'm enjoying life a lot more. Life is more beautiful, and reading has taught me that there are more joys in this world than what's on a screen, what's on a shelf. And so I'm actually able to enjoy my life a little bit more. I married a wonderful, beautiful woman, and together we're growing and we have dreams and aspirations together. And honestly, it's something I needed to understand. And my daughter, she saved me in that moment when she asked me that question. So, thanks to her, I've been able to recover, make a full recovery, and start to teach other people how to start the recovery battle.
Truly, truly empowering, Mr. Travis. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to to please to listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my Abstract Essay is already in fifth season, Abstract Poetry in second season, and my Book 101 review in fifth season too, Comedy 101 in second season, and my Food 101 in fifth season as well, Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them whenever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Travis, if you could leave the audience or viewers with one truth about shame, what would it be? That is a teacher, a liar, or a universal human experience, or something else entirely?
Shame is a tool. It is to help us grow. It is to enlighten us of the reasons that we have dreams and aspirations. Shame is another construct that allows us to understand the world around us and even maneuver in that world around us. And so, like you said, with the other things, um, shame can be detrimental if not kept in check, if you will. And it can also be a growth opportunity waiting around the corner. My advice for people is to recognize your shame, call it out into light, and work on healing yourself from that shame because you're you and you're the best you that you can be. But every day you can strive to be just a little bit better. And I would say do it, not for just yourself, but for everyone around you because you're worth it.
You worth it, people, and let it go and let it go. Mr. Travis Murray, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything that you want to promote on Book 101?
Absolutely. And Daniel, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. It's been a real treat. I've enjoyed the time with you. And if you want to check out my podcast, Man in Progress, Forging Manhood, you can find it on any of the podcasts that you listen to, like Apple, Spotify, or any of those. Or you can go to my website, travismurrayvo.com/podcast, and you'll find it there.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Travis Murray because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. Travis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.